Mr. Walden of Oregon.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank Chairman McClintock and my friend from Arizona for their work on this, and especially Chairman Bishop as well. The Resources Committee has been terrific to work with on this measure over a period of time. The bill is, this is really an important public safety measure. This is a life and death measure. There are more than 5,000 people who live in Crooked River Ranch. This is an unincorporated community in Central Oregon. It's wedged between two river systems, river canyons. You can see it here on this map. I want to point out the two rivers here. It's actually on so it sits up. These are deep canyons. And to the west over here is where the wilderness study area is that we're talking about, and it is juniper, it is cheatgrass, it is sagebrush, it is the most volatile fuels you can have. And unlike here on the East Coast, where in the summer you get thunderstorms and heavy rain with it, out in Oregon we have humidity, we call it rain, it stays in the ground, but in the summer we don't get that. What we get is dry lightning and very little rain. And when lightning strikes occur in that kind of vegetation, it explodes. And I've talked to the firefighters. I'll show you what happens when this happens. So, well, this is the terrain, the overstocked juniper. You can see it over here. And this is very volatile terrain. That's grasslands. And as I say, there's all kinds of other volatile fuels in there. This is at the highest risk category for exposure to catastrophic wildfire. The Wildfire Planning Community Protection Plan calls it that in Jefferson County. Fire season's already underway in Central Oregon. In fact, wildfires have already burned 120,000 acres so far this year, and it's just gotten started. By the way, that's the equivalent of burning about 2.5 times the entire size of Washington, D.C. So what's that look like? When fire gets into these junipers, they basically explode. It's very volatile. Jefferson County Sheriff Jim Atkins took this picture out of his rig of the Graham fire. This fire nearby, not right at Crooked River Ranch, but in the same county, burned a few weeks ago. It burned 2 homes, and it together burned about 2,000 acres. 2,000 acres, couple homes, before they could get in and get it out. So what we're doing here with this legislation is removing 832 acres, that's it, 3/1,000ths of 1% of all the WSAs in Oregon. 3/1,000ths of 1% of the acreage, 832 acres. We're saying we're just going to take it back to the rim of the canyon, and on that flat land, you can go in and thin out these junipers and get it back to where you can do fire management. Now, when I've talked to the fire chiefs and crews there, they've told me, look, in this community of 5,000, there's one road in and out. And if you've got a fire that blows up like this out on the peninsula, out on the end, fire chiefs basically said, if the conditions are wrong and there's wind, I'm not going to put my firefighters' lives at risk, so we will probably not go in and fight that fire. We'll just try and get people out. Could you imagine on a 2-lane road trying to evacuate over 5,000 people with a monster fire breathing down your back? That's what we're trying to avoid here. This WSA was determined in 1992 by the Bureau of Land Management and Forest Service to not be suitable for inclusion as wilderness. They said, nope, doesn't meet the criteria, should not be included. But the way the federal law works is once the agency decides to study one of these areas, all the restrictions come on the land. And as you've heard from both sides of the aisle, that means well, at least our side of the aisle, that means you can't go in and do mechanical thinning, you can't do the kind of work we need to do. And by the way, if there's a fire, it takes all kinds of permission to drop the retardant or to get in there with mechanical means. All we're saying is let's back that up 832 acres along the rim line, send people in, thin this back to where it's in balance, and will not cause devastating wildfire to consume Crooked River Ranch. Let's look at what happens when that does occur. You'll remember this tragedy from my friend's home state, Santa Rosa, California. You don't think fires are monsters and killers and deadly? Look at what happened to this community, the homes and lives that were lost. This is what we're trying to prevent from happening at Crooked River Ranch. With bipartisan support, The House is going to show its will today, and I think overwhelmingly to say this is a measured, thoughtful piece of legislation, with enormous support in the community and the county that will prevent a Santa Rosa from occurring at Crooked River Ranch. And remember, there's one way in and one way out, and 5,500 people who live in this area. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership on this. You and your staff have been terrific. I thank my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I know we have some differences about adding other things in. That can be dealt with, discussed at another time. But we got a serious and deadly threat staring us down every summer. We've got fires already burning in the area. If you want to save lives, prevent deadly fires, this is the bill to do it. This is the time to do it. Let's get it done. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the gentleman from New Mexico has yielded back.